When Kojima left Konami over Metal Gear Solid 5 in the Fox engine in 2015, most people, myself included, mourned the death of Metal Gear, and kind of still do, but we're excited to see what Kojima got up to when he took the weighted clothes off. Fast forward to 2016, and all of a sudden we got this trailer for a new Koji Pro project with that guy from PT and a baby. They're all naked for some reason. For 3 years, Death Stranding was this mysterious game that no one really knew what it was going to be, and now it's been 7 years since it's released, and people still don't know what it was. And say what you will about Death Stranding, but you can't say it wasn't ambitious. Maybe that was what didn't really grab people. Kojima really wanted to make a new genre with Death Stranding, calling it the first ever strand type game, which really just meant a lot of walking, falling, and pissing on rocks. Death Stranding is a game with a lot of ideas and a lot of things to say. Some of those things I think it says really well, and others I don't think that.
Yeah. Like Mario and Princess Peach.
Oh my god!
Hidden underneath the crammed, sometimes really not great dialogue, is a story full of heart about isolation and connection, love and revenge, and a little bit of government conspiracy and nonviolence just to add a little bit of zest. I understand it when people say they don't like Death Stranding. I really do. But it's just hard for me to hate a game that is as honest as Death Stranding. It doesn't try to appeal to a mass audience. It is what Kojima wanted it to be. He took the weighted clothing off and we were gonna like it. But it didn't really feel, at least to me, like a game that needed a sequel. Another Strand type game, and one that had to be entirely rewritten during the pandemic, was not something that I was super excited for. I love Kojima. Don't believe me? Ask my shrine. I think he's a real visionary. That wouldn't make a game just to make it. Not again, at least. But I wasn't gripped by the idea of Death Stranding 2. Then I played it.
Let that yawn out. There's no pretending. I will hold you and protect you. So let love warm you till the morning. And I won't wait before you go. And I still hear your heartbeat.
Death Stranding 2 hit me in ways that I wasn't expecting. Some bad, but the rest of the food was great. I think this game is everything I want from a game, and I think it might be one of my favorite games ever made. And I get that sounds kind of facetious, but don't worry, it's gonna get worse. So here I am writing a big dumb video about it. Kojima is always trying to convey a message to his audience with every game he makes. He wrote in his journal during the creation of Metal Gear Solid 2 that he treats his games sort of like a diary for his thoughts and feelings. And that has never been more clear than in Death Stranding 2. Just about every message Kojima has ever tried to give is a message that this game tries to give too. From genes and memes to AI and government conspiracy, it covers all of the bases. It sounds like it would turn into a convoluted game. Yeah. Even though there are probably too many ideas for a single game, I think Death Stranding 2 actually ends up as a pretty coherent and, all things considered, focused game. It's about parents and their children, but also about connections and grief, but also about AI and the hostile taking over of other countries through perceived benevolence. It's the same stuff Kojima has been preaching since the year I was born, but I think putting it all into a single package turned what could have been an overcooked clusterfuck into something that feels like it was truly 110% Kojima. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing differs depending on who you ask, but I'm the type of guy to write an overlong YouTube video about a video game instead of doing his college homework, so I think you know where I stand on the debate. The first Death Stranding game spent a really long time talking about connections. I mean, a long time. So much so that my first draft of this script said it 15 times in the first 5 minutes. That's a 3 CPM. There is no reason it should be any higher than maybe a 2. The game spends a lot of time pontificating on the idea of the rope and the stick. The idea is that the rope is used to tie things together, not just your cargo, but people, places, and ideas. The stick, on the other hand, is used to ward things off, to scare them away, to push them away. Think big stick policy if you're a freedom burger.
How does anyone find that funny?
Kojima loved this philosophical metaphor so much that every single city in the game is literally called a knot. Port Knot City, Edge Knot City, Central Knot City. And connecting the country via the chiral network is pretty much building the rope that gets tied together by these knots. This metaphorical rope that you spend the whole game bringing across the country is what facilitates people to actually begin to forge human connections again in this world where everyone is totally isolated. And this isn't just a story thing, it extends to the gameplay as well. Every time you connect a new area to the network, you start to see other things players left around the area. Sometimes it's just icons, like where somebody took a piss. Other times it's entire structures. This game came out at the end of 2019, so when most people played it, being able to bring some connection into the world was a welcome change of pace. This combination of story and gameplay both being about connecting to others, even if they aren't physically present, is what I think defines what a quote-unquote strand type game is. But Death Stranding's story is just hard to understand sometimes, and this isn't because it's actually complicated or convoluted. It's actually a pretty simple story, but the way it's presented by throwing a million different made-up jargon at you and constantly jumping between endless and not enough context leads to a very daunting and confusing first playthrough.
Fears. The chiral allergy. So, you have dooms, like me.
I've got the extinction factor, but I think you got me beat.
A cryptobite a day keeps the time fall away.
And I get it, some would argue that was intentional, and perhaps I even agree. Metal Gear Solid's story is the same way, but I think Dunkey said it best when he said that this kind of over-explained dialogue really works for a game about an endless conspiracy, but it doesn't work for a game about hooking up the internet. And again, I like Death Stranding and its story. Sometimes it really works, but most of the time I think it doesn't. But the idea of making a game about literally connecting people together be about the necessity of human connection, I think is a great idea. But at the end of the day, I think Kojima could have done better with Death Stranding. And evidently, he did too, because when Kojima looked at the script for Death Stranding 2 during the pandemic, he scrapped the whole thing. I had the story written before the pandemic, but after experiencing the pandemic, I rewrote the whole thing from scratch. I also didn't want to predict any more future, so I rewrote it. But much like Oedipus, in his pursuit to not predict the future, he might have done just that. Death Stranding 2 takes the message about connection to its natural evolution. Sure, connection is good, you can meet new people, you can make friends, you can fall in love, but you could also get hurt, make enemies, lose people. Is being connected actually driving us further apart? Should we have even connected? I don't want to immediately compare Death Stranding to Metal Gear, because it's clear that Kojima really wants to be separated from it, but not only is this impossible for my tiny monkey brain, but it's not entirely my fault.
Something akin to a phantom pain.
The improvements to Death Stranding 2's gameplay from Death Stranding 1 is a lot like the improvements in Metal Gear Solid 4 from Metal Gear Solid 3. The key word being gameplay, nothing else. Well, mostly. Death Stranding 1 felt very weighty and a bit loose. Sometimes you just couldn't control Sam the exact way you wanted to, and I do think that was very intentional. Death Stranding 2 controls mostly the same, but it's much tighter, faster, and streamlined. It acts much more like you actually want it to. That could be said for a lot of Death Stranding 2. It is way more of what you actually want in a Kojima game. Or at least what I want from a Kojima game. The gameplay in this game isn't just deliveries like the first game. There's driving and shooting and sneaking and surfing, shredding, flying, fighting, and all of it is just silky smooth, and it's actually fun. Kojima is no stranger to sacrificing fun in order to convey a message. I don't think that most of the delivery process in Death Stranding is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to put you in Sam's shoes, and part of me respects that, but the other half of me just wants to do cool shit. Death Stranding 2 was so much fun that Kojima had to change it in development because it was too much fun. I think an argument can be made that the less streamlined elements of the first game is actually a positive and contribute to the overall feeling of the game. And I can see why you might think that, and I honestly might even agree with you, but you can call me lowbrow or stupid or whatever, but I think I just prefer a game like this. Death Stranding 2 not only attempts to streamline and speed up the gameplay of the first, but the story as well. That's not to say that the story is any less weird, in fact it might be weirder, but at least to me it felt much easier to follow. Like I mentioned earlier, just about every single message Kojima has ever tried to give is a message that also finds its way into this game. That aspect of the game really gives it a sort of series finale feeling to it, you know? Like, all of the overarching plot lines of the Kojima storyline are getting wrapped up, both in the games and out of them.
Kept you waiting, huh?
Though that's probably just my inner Kojima meat writer coming out. That's not to say Death Stranding 2 has nothing of its own to say. Death and loss are a major theme throughout the game. And while games like Metal Gear Solid 4 and the first Death Stranding tried to tackle these themes, to varying degrees of success, I think Death Stranding 2 is the game that actually conveys it in not only a convincing way, but a very gripping, emotional, and ultimately very moving way. The game immediately gets you caught up with how the central relationship of the first game is doing. The girl is all grown up! You'd be forgiven for not knowing that Lou was supposed to be a girl, considering they are stated to probably be a boy in dialogue, but later confirmed to be a girl in optional text. Key story revelations being through only text is never something I'm huge about. Games that hide their entire plot behind walls of text and a menu I think rarely work out. I can't really think of any games that do it well except System Shock and maybe Bioshock. A lot of Shock games. Ironically, Death Stranding 2 is one of these systems, but it only serves to flesh out the deeper lore or for you to get caught up on the terminology if you haven't played the first one in a while or took an extended break. Soon after getting reacquainted with Sam and Lou, you reunite with Deadman, who actually turns out to be dead. I'm sorry. I really like this detail where Sam immediately goes to embrace Deadman, which is something that Sam from the first game wouldn't do at gunpoint.
What the hell?
This is the first example in this game of a connection Sam worked really hard to establish being taken away or irreparably changed. And, unfortunately, it's not the last.
It all happened so fast. I couldn't protect Lou. Sam, what's going on?
Can you hear me? Can you see me? You can't. Because you're dead.
The denial, anger, and eventual acceptance of Lou's death is the main driving force of Death Stranding 2. Sure, you have to do some other stuff along the way, but the driving force of all of these things is Sam learning to understand and eventually accept loss. Just about every character you meet in this game has lost something. Your doll companion throughout the game, named Dollman, look, I don't know what you expected from the guy who was going to name his son Fragile Baby Man, tells you stories throughout the game. Some of them more on the nose than others.
The phantom pain.
One of them is about how he lost his wife and in not accepting loss, eventually lost his daughter and even his own body, but has found a second wind in helping others overcome their trauma. The captain of the tar ship, Tarman, lost his son and his hand, but he found his silver lining in being able to feel the tar through his missing hand, making him the only person that can pilot the ship. Heartman lost his original heart, but was able to keep going when Deadman gave his heart to him, giving him the strength to continue. Rainey lost her family, but found a new one in the crew of the Magellan. And Tomorrow lost her memories and her sense of who she is, but eventually finds it through connecting to people like Rainey and Sam. Definitely not Die Hardman lost his ability to actually connect to others, but don't worry. And Fragile lost her life in protecting the ones she loves most. This is a huge reach, but every person you deliver to could be said to have lost something, and Sam is the one to give that back to them, spending the whole game making people whole again, while not being able to do the same for himself. I don't know if that was intentional or not, and even though it's essentially headcanon, I like to believe it. There was a freeze where I live, and if you don't want to slip on the ice, you had to follow the footsteps of the people who walked in it before you did. And I was like, oh my god, my life, it's just like my favorite video game, Death Stranding. Shit. Parenthood has always been something near the heart of all Kojima's games. There's the obvious one, but even Lisa and PT, and now Sam. But even beyond his main characters, many of Kojima's stories tie into the through line of parent and child relationships. Raiden and Rose, Meryl and the Colonel, Hal and Huey, Hal and Sonny, Naked Snake and the Boss, Mama, Neovana, Unger, Bridget. All of these are stories about parenthood. Even to a less literal degree, the Metal Gear games are all about what you will pass on to the next generation. Sure, not all of it is about genetics, though that is important. It's mostly through memes and what you choose to believe in and passing that down to the next generation. Whether they are your literal child, just someone younger than you, or your weird half-clone son that was about to kill himself at the grave of your girlfriend mom. Sam's relationship with Lou, and honestly Sam's relationship to relationships, is put under a microscope. Sam lives only for Lou, casting all others aside, even his friends, after he was used in the last game, essentially throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Probably not a good phrase to use. But throughout the game, his viewpoints keep getting tested by everyone you meet. Even though they've all lost something, they keep going. And not just for themselves, they try to lift everyone else up too. His viewpoints also get validated by Higgs, who pretty much echoes Sam's view on the world, but just in harsher language.
The kid kicked the bucket, huh? Shame. Goddamn shame. Now what, are you just lugging that coffin around? Pod? Going on a walkabout? Well, that's touching.
Through these conversations and conflicts, Death Stranding 2 presents a really moving message of love is worth it, even if it hurts you in the end. Kojima keeps his private life very private. Go figure.
This is stupid.
But one of the few things we do know about his life is that he lost his father at a very young age. That moment in his life left a very big mark on how he views the world, and specifically parent-child relationships. You can see this in how the Metal Gear games all focus on surpassing or defeating your father. But now, Kojima's got two sons, which I think expresses itself on how Death Stranding tackles this through line. In Death Stranding, you aren't the child defying the father, like the terrible children or Raiden. You are the father, caring for and protecting the child. And even though that relationship, like every other, can end in pain, it's still worth it. This feels like the inevitable conclusion of the things Kojima has been trying to say for his whole career. And that's not even the crazy part. It's no secret that Kojima's relationship with Metal Gear hasn't always been the best. And I'm not just talking about at the end. As far back as Metal Gear Solid 2, he wanted to leave the role of director to someone else, but whether it was for creative perfectionism or fan pressure, he kept ending up in the director's chair. Metal Gear, whether Kojima wanted it this way or not, was his baby. Almost his entire career was made up of games with the title. Kojima's exit from Konami, the release of The Phantom Pain, and the subsequent cancellation of Silent Hills led to many conspiracies on whether or not Kojima was trying to comment on his circumstances inside his work.
Snake, you okay? Fox dies, but the Fox engine came out on top. Thanks, Fox engine.
Missions like Deja Vu and some vague comments in Silent Hills really stoked these flames. But nothing is definitive, and in typical fashion, Kojima has never commented on these theories or his exit from Konami in any significant way. Until now.
It was a mistake.
No. No, it was not a mistake. It was not a mistake.
We just got...
Look at me.
We got caught up in our emotions. We weren't thinking straight, that's all.
It was not a mistake. don't care if it's his baby you're carrying. Lucy, I love you.
I love him, Neil. Which means this has to end.
Neil Vana, besides just looking the part,
No! That is not Solid Snake!
is a clear analogy for the Metal Gear franchise and Kojima's relationship with it. Neo was created by the system, used by it, then subsequently dropped. He's unable to move on, and is thus trapped between life and death. And this life that Neo led before the story of Death Stranding even began haunts the entire narrative. Sam could be read under this interpretation to be Kojima's new self, which would line up with what we already discussed. That would make Neo Kojima's old self, constantly bitter and haunting his new life, but is ultimately a beautiful force for good, which makes him dressing as the clearest copyright-free version of our favorite terrible child make the message ring very clear. But Neil isn't the only part of Metal Gear that gets brought into Kojima's new self. Metal Gear Solid 2 spent most of its runtime talking about, among other things, virtual realities. And I don't mean like VR, I mean like the virtual realities all around us, like the internet, and especially AI. People say MGS2 predicted the future, and while I think that gets thrown around a bit much, I don't disagree with it. Its scathing critique of internet saturation, echo chambers, and information control only get more prevalent as we march into a future that is more and more dependent on the internet to optimize everything around us. Death Stranding 2 takes this idea to its logical extreme, where APAS sees things like grief, attachment, parenthood, and sacrifice as inefficiencies, kinks in the rope, if you will. This is obviously not true, as Sam has experienced losing his daughter, his wife, and many of his friends. As you have probably experienced, life is hard, but you and him still choose to connect, to get attached, and to love others, even if it might destroy you in the end. Instead of information control, it is ultimate control, the ultimate stick. It doesn't hurt you or attack you. It simply removes your need to connect at all. No rope required. I think a story like this could have only been made during a time like the pandemic. Sort of a fucked up trial by fire. Kojima approached 60 during the height of the pandemic in 2020, and he battled serious illness during the creation of Death Stranding 2, which is why I think the game turned out the way it did. Not to say that creators need to suffer to make good art, though that is what happens, but correlation ain't causation and all that. I just think that this isolation and brush with the other side Kojima and his team experienced during the inception of this game is why it feels like Kojima put his all into it. Everything that makes Kojima, Kojima, warts and all. And what came out was the most Kojima game ever made. Forgot to put that CPM means connections per minute. Whatever, they'll understand.